Sports Speaker Series. Today is the second session in a three-part series where our speakers are discussing the impact of COVID-19 on the sports industry. And our today's speakers are Hendrickx and Jakob Larsen. Frank, Jakob, could you please introduce yourselves and then we can start the session.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hendrickx. I am Professor Sports Management in different universities in Barcelona and Madrid. And today we're going to talk about COVID-19 and the fate of sporting mega events. And to do that, we have invited Jakob Larsen, Director of Competitions and Events at World Athletics. Let me introduce Jakob shortly. He's the Director of Competitions and Events at World Athletics, as I mentioned, a position he undertook in April 2020. Prior to joining World Athletics, he was the CEO of the Danish Athletic Federation, a position he had held since 2007. Jakob also served as the Director of the 2014 World Half Marathon Championships, as well as the 2019 World Athletics Cross Country Championships. As the race director of the annual World Athletics Gold Label race, the Royal Run and other road running events, he oversaw event operations with more than 200,000 entries per year. Welcome, Jakob. Thank you very much for joining us for this session this afternoon.
Thank you. It's a delight to join you. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah. Today, so we're going to talk about athletics. Athletics is the most participated sport in the world, okay? So, and we all know that through COVID-19, because of COVID-19, a lot of running races and running events have been canceled and postponed over the last months. And so it's affecting the running world drastically. So maybe we could have a look together, Jakob, at how the stakeholders of the running competitions, both popular and professional competitions, are affected by COVID-19. And maybe we can do that going one by one, looking to the stakeholders, and we can start maybe with the popular running. There, of course, we have the event organizers. We have mega events, we have local events. Can you tell us a bit more about how these people are being affected and looking at the future, what's going to happen in the near future with them?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, what's going to happen in the near future, isn't it? The fact is that we have this hierarchy of running events, if you will, that based on scale, based on financial size of revenue overall. And I would argue that at World Athletics, what we do, we certify the top level races in the label program. We got 168 races in this system. And as of today, approximately 20% has been canceled. And there's still 40% approximately who is on hold, if you will, for the remaining of the year. We managed to have, I think it was 10-15% managed to be held prior to the COVID-19 outbreak. Now, for these races, I think you can categorize them, as well as any other race, as the true mega events. Some of them, they will get through this without, yes, it will cost them a lot of money, but they will survive. They do have a rainy day fund, so they should be able to, in fact, pull through. And they will do whatever they can to reduce the amount of money they have to return to sponsors, etc. Then you have the next level of race organizers, and this could be major races. We're talking about races that would be top of mind for any recreational runner, but they're still not at the level of, for instance, London Marathon financially. These races suffer tremendously at this point because they may not have a rainy day fund, if you will, and they may not even be able then to pay to provide revenue for the grassroots movement that is actually surrounding them. So it's a big problem for the business which they operate, but it's also, there's a trickle down effect on surrounding minor businesses and club systems, etc. Mm-hmm. The next level then would be the mid-sized races. We could talk about races ranging from 1,000 to 5,000, 8,000 participants. They will probably do rather okay, because that's not really, you could argue it's a business, but it's very passion driven. So they are very likely to survive without major implications. There will be consequences, but it's manageable. And then, of course, you have the very small initiatives like the park run, which overall is a major initiative, but at the local stage is a very minor event, and they'll do just fine once we're through all of this. So I think you could say that the ones who will suffer the most is likely to be the mid-sized, upper-sized races, ranging from perhaps 10 to 25,000 participants. They're in for a rough ride.
Yeah, because I understand that a lot of these event organizers, they really rely on maybe one or two races a year, and they prepare for that way ahead. And of course, they have not diversified, most probably. They don't have like different businesses, and so that will be difficult times for them, I understand. No, they have been building up to certain events which are not taking place. Now have to wait for the next year, because that is programmed like that. They cannot change the date now so easily if you're a mid-sizer. So I understand it's going to be difficult times for them. No, what do you think that they can do? Is there any magic formula, or what do you know that they are trying to do? Because they foresee already that they're going to have problems. Are they now trying to diversify? Are they trying to go into different businesses? Are they just like holding on, trying to survive and say, okay, let's see where we get with our cash flow? What's happening with them? Do you know a bit more about that?
From a general perspective, what we're seeing right now is the protection of the revenue gain for this year. So we're talking about sponsorships, and we're talking about registration fees for the race they intended to plan. Now, most races, once you register for a race, you're basically signing a force majeure clause, which says that in case of cancellation, your registration fee is, you forfeit it. However, some races may indeed have this clause, but they're hesitant to actually put it into motion, because the race is intended to go on next year. So if you in fact tell your customers, sorry, you will not get the product you actually paid for, would you care to come back next year? This doesn't, there is a problem in this. So some of these race organizers, what they'll do is they'll try to say, okay, we cannot provide the original content, but we will provide you with an alternative product, which could be virtual races. We're all seeing this huge emergence of virtual races, but also training sessions, be that online or in smaller groups. So what you're seeing right now is an emergence of a lot of initiatives simply trying to provide an alternative type of content. That's for the registration fee. The same goes for sponsorships. The sponsors are not getting the exposure through the event that was planned. So the race organizers are trying to provide the exposure through other means. Same goes for virtual races, training sessions, communications with the race, entries, etc. So we're seeing all these kinds of different initiatives trying to come up with alternative content. Some are also saying, sorry, we're canceled, and your entry fee is forfeit. But that's I think you can be rather certain that when a race organizer, when he or she is doing this, that's the last step they want to go, because it is not without complications.
Yeah, I understand. Now we saw in I think it was in March, that the Tokyo Marathon was cancelled for the popular runners, but still the race was going on for the professionals. Is this going to happen, you think, in the future when we, let's say, restart the running races, like maybe first competition level and then popular? Or do you think that it might, what if you would have a look into the future, what do you feel that's going to happen? It's difficult, of course, we all know that, but what would be a first step, second step, third step? What is in the mind of the people now?
Yeah, so and this is there's no I'm not a fortune teller, so I'm not able to look into the future, but I would argue that this depends on the business model for each race. Some of these races, and this is it ties into geographics as well. Some parts of the world, the elite part of the race is extremely important. Whereas for others, it's the mass race that's important, and they're basically using the mass race to pay for the elite race. So in a Western European sense, for most races, the mass race is by far the most important part of it. And they will look to rebuild the mass race first. And then in time, when the financial situation is improved, they would look to add the elite aspect as well.
Okay, that's an interesting.
In other parts of the world, the elite race is extremely important. So you could imagine seeing in countries, select cities, they'll just shut down the city and do an elite race only, and then in time start adding the mass race. So it all depends on the entire business model of the race.
Yeah.
And I would argue that this has a lot to do with where you are located in the world.
Yeah. Now, one stakeholder very much affected as well are the cities. Okay. I mean, the major marathons, we're talking about 20, 30, 40,000 participants. Maybe like, I know the Barcelona marathon, almost 50% or 40% are foreigners. They come with their families. They spend the weekend in the city. I mean, the popular marathons in Europe and in the United States, it's the same formula. So, well, they must be very much affected here, no? Is there anything you can say about that, Jakob?
Yes, so for the major cities, metropolises, you could argue that these mass races, it's good for tourism, and now it's gone. However, we need to also compare the international tourism created by a mass race, major marathon, and we need to compare that with, for instance, an international congress for dentists, right? In many ways, I mean, these congresses, business congresses, is in many ways even better business. However, there is one particular difference. One of them does not really appear in newspapers. It doesn't provide any kind of brand marketing. It's good for business, but not so much for branding. And it doesn't drive a health agenda. So I think the major loss for cities is, in fact, the brand opportunities, the branding opportunities of the city, and furthermore, also driving the health agenda. So we do know from research in select countries that entering a mass race, entering a major race will in fact drive your daily physical activity. With the race gone, what happens then? And this is uncharted territory, but I would argue that the city is probably, from a financial perspective, looking even more towards the congresses of dentists, pharmaceuticals, etc. Whereas from a branding perspective, driving the health agenda, these races play a huge role in that.
Okay. If we go to another stakeholder like the governing bodies, federations, how much are they affected by the COVID-19 now in general, if we can talk about that? What can you say about that?
Well, in many ways, international federations, even national federations, international federations, the entire reason for being originally was competition, and now it's gone. Then what? So you could argue that in many ways, the entire infrastructure upon which these federations are built is just gone, or at least suspended. And this leads to two things. First of all, a kind of confusion: what to do next? How do we actually fulfill the requirements made and the demands made upon us in our constitution, in our bylaws, etc.? We need to have annual championships. How do we even do that? How do we do the Olympic Games postponement? We still need to have a qualification system. What does all of this mean? How do we create a system with parity despite all of these asynchronized, the lack of synchronization in the COVID-19 globally? So a lot of thinking is being put into this right now, that first of all, need to reinvent yourself in a time with no competition. We need to do something else. But also planning for a time where not when things get back to normal, but the process of getting back to normal is the tricky part. Once we're back to normal, we're back to normal, maybe. But in theory, once we're back to normal, things start, you get the structure. But the transition from definitely not normal to normal is very, very complicated because of these systems that's been, they're tuned to each other, and all of a sudden it gets there's no synchronization anymore.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of effort is being put into that, every sport, every country.
Yeah. Now maybe it's a good moment to talk a bit more about the governing body, the World Athletics, the former IAAF, as a lot of people know it. Maybe it would be interesting to tell, and maybe we should have started with that. What disciplines do you cover actually with the World Athletics? Because there's a lot of different disciplines you're covering. As well, it would be interesting maybe to understand a bit more like how does it work with regards to economics, to finance, to how are you financed, and the resources that you get, how do you apply them to the world of running, of athletics? And maybe very interesting as well, how is grassroots, how is the, let's say, the talent development let's say supported by the whole structure through the federation, through the governing body, the national federations, and then the young athletes, no? So
Yep.
Maybe a lot of questions in one question, but what can you say about that, Jakob?
Yes. Overall, so the disciplines within World Athletics is traditional Olympic sports, as you all know, the sprints, the middle and long distance running, the jumping disciplines, long jump, triple jump, pole vault, etc. We've got the throwing disciplines, race walk, combined events. So this is very traditional Olympic disciplines. Besides that, we also got the trail running, which is a rather new thing. We got cross-country running, which is a historic discipline. I would argue the oldest of all disciplines. We got mountain running. So all these variations of running, actually. And then in recent years, you could argue that the competitive structure has been also, it's been supplemented with the recreational part of it. So we have what I would say is basic recreational focus, recreational walking, recreational running, which is not done because of competition, but for other reasons. Mm-hmm. So we got the Olympic sports, which we would call in-stadium events, and we got the out-of-stadium events, which would be traditionally cross-country, mountain running, trail running, mostly, but also actually recreational walking as well. The financial structure of the World Athletics is most revenue is commercial and comes from being part of the Olympic Games. So there is part of the revenue gained in the Olympic Games goes to the international federations, also by extension World Athletics. We also have our own revenue from our own events. So we have 7 different World Championships events in a 2-year cycle. The main one being the World Championships, as most people are probably familiar with, the in-stadium championships. This creates a lot of revenue, and this is by far the biggest source of income, the competition structure. We have other sources as well, but having these events, the broadcast rights, commercial rights, etc., provides by far the biggest part of our income. The money is used, obviously, we have an organization which requires some kind of funding to even operate, but the majority of the money is spent actually doing the events and also doing development for the sport, which would be at World Athletics level. We do have our own development initiatives, but also providing significant support for the areas, which in normal language, that would be the continents. So we have area associations, European athletics, South American, North American, Asian, etc. So we provide development support for the areas. And finally, we also provide support for select member federations. It's not for all member federations because some of them are actually doing quite well. So we definitely want to target our support for the member federations who need it the most. But in the very brief version is that this is the way our income is distributed. So we have the global level, area level, national level.
Yeah. Now, so you're saying that you rely a lot on the sponsors, on the broadcasters. So there is no mega events happening now, and we might expect that for the next months there won't be any neither. So how does it affect your organization actually? I understand you have long-term agreements with sponsors, but of course there is no broadcasting. And we've seen that in the football world. All the major leagues were desiring to continue their leagues because it was all related to the broadcasting money. So how does it affect you? And well, once again, we don't know how the future looks like, but what contingency plans do you have there?
First of all, you've all been aware about this reshuffling of the calendar in all sports. This is obviously part of that equation that all sports will be fine if fine is yes, relatively speaking, fine. If events can actually take place, not necessarily at the time originally intended or the dates originally intended, but within the contractual obligations we have within that period, it can take place within that. Okay, we're in a good position. If indeed it comes to a cancellation and it's not possible to reschedule, obviously then things start to get slightly complicated. For some events, there is an insurance, not all, but for some events there are. And then it also depends on which competitions we're talking about, because we do not necessarily make money on all competitions. We do in fact have events where we spend money, simply because it's, as I said, we spend part of our income in actually hosting these events, and some of them they carry a net loss. But it's something we do because we feel it's important to develop the sport. And obviously, canceling this kind of event, it has implications for the sport, but financially, it's not a major issue, obviously, because we actually lose money when we host it.
Okay.
So it depends. Short term, I think it's fair to say that we as an organization are in a good position. Insurances, we have insurance for some of these events. However, should this go on for an extended time, and we're talking years, then of course everything changes, and it changes for us, it changes for everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Because I mean, you have the Diamond League, you have national championships, you have a lot of other major events, and of course it's always like events where well, there's a lot of people assisting, no, which is in big stadia, no. So when we can say maybe popular running, it's going in one direction, maybe professional competitions with audience will go like a bit slower in its, let's say, in the post-COVID-19, no? Is it correct what I'm saying? That
yes, in stadium events, we will have still a situation for quite some time about it's very unlikely, as we all know, that having full capacity in a stadium looks very unrealistic for on the short-term basis. And of course, this has implications. Now, for us, our next in-stadium event that we own 100% would be the World Indoor Championships. This is in March next year, and then we have the World Championships, which was postponed from 2021 to 2022. So we're not concerned on our behalf. But you're absolutely right mentioning the Diamond League. Now, the Diamond League is a series of one-day meets, major Grand Prix meets. We're part owner of the series, but each meet is a standalone organization, if you will. And for this particular construction, I would argue that this ties in with the road running thing we discussed, that the mid-sized ones are really at risk here. And in this context, I would argue that each meet organizer should be considered a mid-sized organization. And they have a huge problem right now because we own, in many ways, we operate the series, but they operate the individual meet.
Yeah.
And the individual meet is the one being challenged significantly right now.
Yeah. Because I mean, most of these Diamond League races are taking place in the summer, okay, July, August, September.
Yeah.
They are not going to they're not going to happen in 2020. So they're going to 2021, same dates more or less, July, August, September, which is like 1 year and a half of, well, it's a long time actually before they really get, again, financial income, no? So,
well, yes and no. So the Diamond League is made up of 14 meets, and as of today, 4 have been canceled. One has been organized in a very modified version, the Impossible Games in Oslo.
Yeah.
And we have 9 Diamond League meets rescheduled and modified to various degrees. Now, they will lose a significant amount of money from people in the stadium. There'll just be less people.
Yeah.
But from a television perspective, it's still there. Now, you could argue that the product will suffer because there are less people in the stadium. But the competition part of it is, I wouldn't say it is 100% intact.
Yeah.
But we are looking to resume Diamond League within the next month.
Okay.
And,
so it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Yes, but in a very modified version, and there are a lot of reasons for the modifications. Some of it even being that international travel is still being compromised. The narrative of the meets have to change. It's an important part of our qualification system for the Olympic Games. However, this only works if it provides equal access for all countries, which just doesn't right now. So the narrative, the story behind the Diamond League, what's it all about, just has been forced to change. So now it's more about celebration of, yes, we're back at competition, right? It's finally here again.
Yeah.
So it's been changed, but we will have a Diamond League season, however, in a very modified version.
So, and maybe that's a good moment to talk about the athletes. Of course, they are hugely affected. Later on, we will talk about Tokyo 2020. I think everybody's interested in that. So you're saying now that the athletes are preparing for the season, actually. I mean, the elite athletes for Diamond Leagues, etc. They're preparing for that. They're getting ready for that.
Yes, and we do actually have competitions ongoing, but it's mostly national or, let's say, regional competitions in the countries where people are allowed to travel. But we do have competitions. Now, the format of competitions vary tremendously, simply because the restrictions right now in each country, they just differ so much. So you would have countries with more or less normal competitions, however, with less people in the stadium, but more or less normal. And you would have other countries who have had to develop very different and significant changes to the competition, the flow of competition, the guidelines of how to do the competitions with social distancing, etc., which basically has led to, for instance, a 1,500-meter race being done as an individual time trial instead of a group race.
Okay.
So we have very different local iterations of how do we actually compete. This is the situation right now.
Okay, good.
So they are competing. We do have national records, etc., being set, not on a daily basis, but every weekend, actually. We do see high performance competition, but it is in local meets, national meets, etc., and it is with very few people as spectators. But in fact, we are in fact resuming competition. Olympic qualification and even all, the entire qualification pathway for the World Championships, Olympic qualification has been suspended though, from now and up until December 1st. And this has to do with the equal access, if you will, or equal opportunity. So we're just waiting until everyone's back in more or less full operational mode, and then qualification will resume. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. So maybe a good opportunity now to talk a bit more about Tokyo 2020. which will be Tokyo 2021. But athletics is the Olympics Games leading sports. We all know that. So how does the, let's say, postponement of Tokyo 2020 affect your organization, athletics? What is the economic impact for you guys? And how do you see, well, there's a lot of stakeholders there. So we have the sponsors, the city, we have the local organization committee, we have broadcasters, athletes, ticketing, etc. What is for you the most important loser? Maybe it's not a word. Who's most affected? And do you think like reorganizing it in 2021 that we can like 100% reduce the impact, or no, there are losers already at this moment?
Oh, there are definitely losers. I would argue that the hosts major loser in this. We cannot. We simply need to be aware of the fact the implications for the hosts in this, and as sporting organizations, as member federations, national Olympic committees, we need to be really appreciative of what the efforts being done in Japan, and also be conscious of the fact that there is a cost associated with this, so we need to treat it with respect. That the cost of postponing an Olympic Games for a year is significant. Let's just put it like that, significant. And we all need to be very respectful of that fact.
Can you elaborate a bit on that, Jakob? What is the, let's say, the impact indeed of postponing Olympic Games?
To be perfectly honest, I don't even know the cost of a postponing.
Not saying in numbers, but like which stakeholders are like in what way suffering from that? No.
First of all, you need to reschedule everything. So you as an organizer, you have booked hotels, you have booked facilities, you have made all these reservations, etc. Now you even have the Olympic Village, right? And there were people planning to move in immediately after the games as their residents. Now all of a sudden, all of this changes. So the amount of work and the amount of probably additional cost that will go into even doing that, rescheduling all of this, changing all of this, is tremendous. It's not something you just do with flicking your fingers. Even having the IOC being able to say, yes, we'll go again in a year, it's an amazing effort, amazing. So there's that part of it. So I really feel that we need to be very tremendous respect for the efforts done in Japan. Also, a tremendous. There's no way the athletes are not going to lose because consider the career, the time span of an athlete's career. In some sports, the earning potential is not really why they do it. It's not per se a professional sport with high income. But for some it is, and all of them have some kind of income. So you got, let's just for sake of the argument say you have a career of 10 years. Now all of a sudden we've basically pulled out 1 year of your earning potential as an athlete. And I'm not strictly talking finance here. There's also, of course, those who actually wanted to make it a last Olympic of their career. Yes, exactly. So there's the emotional part of it, the career planning part of it, and definitely also just losing a year in a very, very short career. So athletes definitely, and there's no, even postponing doesn't change that. They still lose a year.
And now if we look, I mean, can we say that as there is less money in the ecosystem, that athletes will also suffer from that, because in the end, the money goes down to them preparing themselves for their career, for the championships. If this money is not going down from the International Olympic Committee to the federation, to the local Olympic committees, to the federations, to the runners, to the athletes, what effect? What's going to be the effect? What impact do you foresee there? Are people?
I guess the impact's the same as in any other trade, that people getting unemployed, etc., and they will suffer financially, personally. I guess it's not different than any other trade, basically. But since we're in the world of sport, this is what we're looking at, and these people are basically unemployed all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And the social security framework for athletes differs tremendously from country to country. So in some countries, this is a tremendous blow to their private financial situation. In other countries, less so. We as the governing body, we have provided a support fund with a significant amount of money. However, the number of athletes is just way too big, and the deficit is just way too big for us to even be able to go anywhere near covering it. But at least we've made some efforts. Others have done the same. I mean, the situation is that some of them, they'll have no choice but try and just find work. In some countries, the national support system of the Olympic Committee are able to somehow adjust, but it doesn't change the fact that race organizers, meet organizers, they're also struggling, and they're going to keep they're not going to support athletes unless we work together. So a very important part of being an international federation right now is mitigation, simply trying to distribute the losses in a, I wouldn't say fair way, but still making sure that minimize the sum of pain felt. There's pain felt at international federation, at national federation, at organizer level, and at athlete level. And if this is not regulated or mitigated, odds are that athletes will end up paying by far the biggest part of it, and the mid-sized organizers. So the mitigation of what's going on right now, I think that's extremely important. Even so we all know in football the finances is different, but so they would have agents, and you hear all the stories about the amount of money in that system. Now in other sports you got agents as well, and the finances are slightly different, and these people tend to fly under the radar in this situation because their livelihood is affected in a tremendous degree as well. So it's not only about athletes, it's also about the entire support system surrounding the athletes, including athletes representatives, i.e. agents, physiotherapists, coaches who are actually often making a livelihood out of coaching athletes. So it's athletes, yes, but it's also the entire support system.
Yeah, it's a lot of related industries are affected as well, no? As you say, the physiotherapists, podiatrists, etc., etc.
Yes.
So there's a lot of losers here. That's very sad, of course. Do you recognize any winners as well? There's always a few winners. Do you recognize them? Maybe are there new technologies, new formats, new strategies introduced? I mean, we're talking about virtual running. There must be some winners as well here, no?
Short term, no, I don't see any winners at all. Long term, yes, I do see winners, and this is just a personal reflection. I do see the very big ones actually winning because they can sustain the losses, financial losses, whereas the immediate competition may not be able to. And I'm talking organizers or even any commercial clubs, etc. Furthermore, I do actually see sport as a whole winning in the long term, but this is definitely long term, not short term. And the reason for this is that I think every sport, every organization, it's always we're always aware of things that we would like to change, but given circumstances, it could be very difficult to change. This could be competition structure, regulations, etc. However, the current situation is it's a get out of jail free card for making changes, because everyone knows that these are in extraordinary circumstances, which means that you're actually able to test new initiatives, new ways of thinking, basically for free. You can do that because it's acceptable. So you can test things, you can trim your competition program, you can trim your organization right now, and it's acceptable because people know these are special circumstances. You can do things, you can get away with doing things right now, which would politically, even community-wise, would have been unacceptable a year ago.
Yeah.
So, and I think this is a good thing for the sport, but not short term. I would like to make that perfectly clear. It's a very painful situation, but in 5-10 years time, we may actually see that sport has benefited from it.
Yeah. Okay. Jakob, maybe let's see if we have any questions in the meantime already. Let me see if I can check that. Is there any questions from the group?
As far as I can see, there are no questions in the chat, but I see Naivedia. Did you raise your hand? Feel free to turn your mic on.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Mr. Jakob. Pleasure meeting you. Hi, Frank. So hi, Mr. Jakob, question for you. When I was going through the Olympic.org website, there are courses which is called like athlete courses, which is offers 365 courses for athletes, which kind of helps developing or molding them into either the baton holders of their specific sports or something of those sorts. And I'd like to know if this can be implemented within the national bodies as well, because the Olympic is very big and it has got a huge pool under. So do you think this kind of education system post their career, because as you said, athletes' career is small. Some have 10, some if they get injured have 4, and it's over. So how do you see as an organization and a director of a complete IAF, do you see this kind of implementation happening more and more and educating athletes, whether post or even during their campaigns?
Yes, I think it's already happening. I think this is a step that is natural, and I think it's already happening. You do see some national Olympic committees actually doing that right now. So you would have specific national Olympic committees saying that we will fund your sports career, but only if you also do education at the same time, or if you do follow certain guidelines that will ensure that you are a well-rounded human being. Let's put it like that, right? So I do see this happening at National Olympic Committee level. This trickles into the national federations as well, and I would argue that it also trickles over into international federations for specific sports. So yes, I think it's happening as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I also, there's another question. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Hi. Hey, Jakob and Frank, thanks for the talk today. I am trying to remove that background, just ignore it. I was trying something and then it just went there. Just a quick one, Jakob. You talked about the Diamond Leagues, and I want to bring in the Continental Tour, which is also a very new thing. We are starting it in August. So if at all we're already struggling with the Diamond Leagues as we go on right now, what is the situation of the Continental Tour? I come from Kenya. We are looking forward to host one in Nairobi. We're already wondering whether it's going to happen. So what's the situation?
So it's a good, just for background. So the Continental Tour is the second tier level competition below the Diamond League. It's a series that we are launching this year. We have huge expectations for this series. The Continental Tour is challenged in the same way, in the exact same way as the Diamond League. You're absolutely right. The Continental Tour will go on, but it's compromised in the same way. So we have a few meets canceled, but most meets have been postponed and will take place in a modified form. In fact, we expect to launch the Continental Tour Gold level, which Kenya is part of. We expect to do a launch in 8 days, actually, of the remainder part of the seasons. in many ways, it's easier from my perspective. In my positions, the Continental Tour is easier to deal with than the Diamond League, simply because the Continental Tour is new, which means that a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the commercial partnerships, etc., is not as well founded as Diamond League, and which paradoxically provides us with a lot more flexibility. So in many ways, I think it's easier, simply because expectations and tradition is less embedded than it is with the Diamond League. But we will have a Continental Tour this year. We will do.
Oh, all right, I'm looking for that in Nairobi. Frankie, if you just allow me to have two more questions. I love athletics. I love athletics, and
like you guys asking questions. So go ahead.
Thank you. Now, the other question will be on the format of the virtual games that we are having. To be precise, the Impossible Games that took place in Oslo last month. What's the future of this? How long can we sustain this? Because when I watched it, because it was primarily Kenya and the IGA Brightsons in Norway, clearly we cannot sustain it because of the altitude in Nairobi. And I don't know how fair this is going to be, because we end up being losers and we are not being used to being losers. So how sustainable can this be?
No, so this was the initial test, and I think we should see it as that it was a test, and it was, and this is the beauty of the current situation, is that we get to test a lot of things live. And some of it works, some of it doesn't. Part of the Impossible Games, I think, went very, very well. Other parts, I think we could say it was a nice try, and we probably need to modify. In the future, to be perfectly honest, I don't see this current situation will change everything and everything will be virtual. I think what we're going to see is that we will learn bits and pieces that could be included. I think that's where we're heading. But your guess is as good as mine. I think it's so in Sweden, just for background, in Sweden, they have held a series of meets within every stadium. So every stadium had been able to do a club competition, a very small club competition, and they would be able to send in results. On any given week, they would have long jump or hurdles race. And then you would do a club competition virtually based on that. It's not, you wouldn't call this like part of a international circuit or anything, but it does provide grassroots activity and interaction between clubs. I think that's probably where we'll see the biggest growth.
Yeah, unfortunately, we end up being the losers. Anyway, my last question, I hope. You talked about rebuilding the masses is what many countries in Western Europe will look forward for in major competitions or mid-sized, and others will look at maintaining the elite side of the athletes. Is that where then we can strike a balance in between? Because since March, the interruption of the Tokyo Marathon, which is one of the major marathons series, when they narrowed it down to 200 elite athletes, we have seen the cancellation of London and all the other races, and even Berlin, which is very, very popular and where we are used to seeing the breaking of the marathon records. So if at all we look at maintaining the masses and not bringing in the elite, and others are looking forward where to maintain the elite and not bringing the masses, then we lose something in the future in between. What's your advice, Jakob, in striking the balance for the major marathons ahead?
No, you're absolutely right. And this is when I was talking about mitigation of the loss, this is specifically also part of that question, is that, so we need race organizers and meet organizers. Priority number one, enable them to survive. We simply need to keep them alive until we're back to normal. This is top priority. But very near top priority is also minimizing losses for the athletes. This is also very, very important. This is where we're trying to strike a balance, because we do have the label program for the road races. So what we're going to do this year, and we've already communicated this to the races, is that, okay, we suspend the requirements. However, this will not go on indefinitely. For now, please engage with elite athletes at the level you're able to. And we will on a case-by-case deal with the races. They pay for their labels. So the benefits and the cost of the labels they get from us depends on the number of elite runners they interact with. That's basically it. We're trying to strike the balance to make the races, to keep the races alive for next year and even beyond that, but while also ensuring that elite athletes actually have races to go to.
Okay, all right.
Because otherwise we would have races where, well, elite athletes would have nothing. They would have more or less nothing. This is not good for the sport as a whole.
Okay, let me take a break before Frankie. I don't want to take the forefront. Frankie is a moderator, but I will ask later.
No, please, Wanyiko, you can do. I mean, this is also your moment, so don't worry.
Okay, maybe one last one. How about if at all we organizing virtual and a few things here and there to maintain the flow of different competitions? So what do we do? What will be your advice in road races? Because like you said, this is a place that is really missing out, maybe from 10 kilometers to around 15, 25. It doesn't have to be a full marathon, even a half marathon, maybe between 10 to a half marathon. What's your take? Can we try virtual maybe? Short term?
Yes, we could. The problem, you already highlighted part of the issue with virtual, that it definitely depends on local conditions. So I do see virtual being mostly for the mass races. For elite, I don't really see it because local conditions vary tremendously. And even to be, so from a spectator point of view, I would argue that it's the head-to-head fight, the fight between the individuals being in the same location at the same time that matters. Having time trials going on, different locations, it's a substitute and it doesn't really do competition full justice. So I do see virtual being mostly for masses, not necessarily for elite. Unfortunately, it would make a lot of things easier.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Wanyiko.
Welcome.
A few more questions maybe as well from my side, Jakob. I would be particularly interested in how is the decision process to organize a race or not. I understand there's a lot of local event organizers that would like to organize their event. Do they need authorization from the local authorities, from you guys? And are you working with the World Health Organization continuously? How does it work actually?
Yeah. No, this is a first and foremost, it's a discussion between the organizer and the city. So the city is they are the ones who say go, no go. So by far the most important partner in all of this for every race would be city. Without city approval, you have no race. And in the current situation, this is really important because the easy decision right now for any city is to say, we will not have it. Mm-hmm. That's the easy decision. So right now, it's extremely important for any race and for us as their support federation to provide guidelines to say it is doable having these races, even under the current circumstances. So we have provided a guidelines for having mass races, COVID-19 guidelines, if you will. Because as said, otherwise, if we don't have a framework to just being able to present, this is the way it's doable, and this has been delivered by trained and experienced medical doctors, etc. If we do not have that, the easy choice for any city is just to say, no, we will not have a race.
That's
because
right.
just too many people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they would rather go for, and they would rather probably focus first and foremost on the so-called professional sports. Mm-hmm. So the job on our side is also to communicate that yes, finance in football and in other traditionally considered pro sports is big, but so is road running, but for other reasons. You earn more money as a top footballer than you do as a top runner. However, from a health perspective, the cost of not having a mass race is actually significant.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, we need to be able to provide a framework which would not boost the spread of COVID-19, but in fact, keep everyone safe. But we just know from research that entering a race does drive daily training for ordinary people. So from a health agenda perspective, the cost of not having these races needs to be factored in as well. And that's the agenda we have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Please don't forget the health agenda when you consider the cost of having football matches, marathon races, etc. That it's actually a very important part of a population's daily lives.
Maybe soon we will have the company that is able to produce masks that you can use for a run of 5 or 10K. Imagine, no?
Yeah, well,
I've been trying to run with mask. It's a difficult one.
Yeah, so the first real major race we'll see soon. I mean, Hamburg is scheduled to do a 10,000 entry marathon. I believe it's in September. They are the first with a really big race, at least in Europe. That'll be interesting to see because the protocol of how to do this, how do you do this operationally? Yeah. That'll be a huge learning experience for all race organizers.
Yeah, because if you look at the football, the protocol for any league game behind closed doors, it's tremendous.
Yes.
Imagine for a running race, no, where so many people are involved, volunteers, runners, organizers. So that's a difficult one, no?
Yeah.
Last question from my side. I know that the World Athletics Organization has also a development cooperation program. Are you involved in that or not really?
No, not my department. I'm not involved in that. But it's true. We do several development programs. We do, I believe I mentioned it before. We do have development programs with national federations and the area associations. Yeah. But also we have partnerships with the external organizations, if you will, outside the athletics community. So we do have. We actually announced a few days ago a partnership with Parkrun.
Okay.
We will work together by whenever we go to a city with the championships, we will work to leave behind a legacy, which could include a park run. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this is already in place in a lot of cities, but it's not everywhere. We also work with other partner organizations, child welfare, sustainability, etc. So we do have a range of different organizations we work with.
Yeah. Okay, great. Is there any more questions from the audience?
Yeah, I do have a couple.
Oh, yeah.
Two.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first one was like, so I was part of the Spartan race, which is becoming more of a recreational kind of thing. So, I mean, that's the t-shirt I'm wearing. So I did it once, but I did the shorter thing. But now I can't because of my injury. I wanted to know if you see recreational, like Tough Muddler, Spartan race, jump, crawl, and mud, and these kind of races kind of being a kind of a different revenue streams for the the athletics governing body, etc., or are they simply just privatization and you kind of divide yourself from it?
So short-term perspective, World Athletics is not looking to move into obstacle course racing. That being said, I would argue that what we're seeing right now in the running industry, running community, event organizing, is a vanishing of the borders between the different disciplines. Yeah. So the most recent World Cross Country Championships, which was held in March last year, I would argue there was some inspiration from obstacle course racing. And what we're seeing right now, in my opinion at least, is that whereas organizations and organizers are spending a lot of time discussing whether or not they're obstacle course racing, trail running, cross country, sky running, fell running, etc., participants, they don't really care. They're looking forward to the experience. And I would argue as we move forward, this is why I'm saying that this division of disciplines will start to disappear, and we will see overlapping. So the cross country could be potentially be inspired by trail running, which could be inspired by obstacle course racing, etc. The obstacle course racing is interesting because they are targeting. It's kind of like, it's very tough. It's like doing the Ironman. It is not for everyone. Their communications wise, they're not saying this is for everyone, which is from a business perspective it's a very niche product, kind of like the Ironman. Whereas road running has taken a different approach. It's for everyone. That's probably the biggest difference, I would argue.
And thank you. Sorry. And my second question was, so this is broad scale Olympics in general, but this also comes in for the World Cup, which happened in 2014 and in 2016. And then there is this notion of the white elephants, which are being left or not seen or being unused. And these are huge losses, economical losses for the country and the continent itself. It happened in Brazil. It also happened in Russia because the expense was 3 times more than expected. I don't know whose responsibility is it, or is it like the country should have an understanding with the Olympic body to say, we have to have an understanding. We can't have a multiple loss because it runs down. You won't recover this in 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. You might recover it in 30 years, depending on the economic situation of the respective country. So how does the Olympic or even the World Athlete Federations look at this and say, okay, we need to find a kind of a balance in between?
Yeah. So the IOC have been rather clear in recent years about the need to share facilities. So you can't have each discipline its own facility. There needs to be more sports in each facility, at least as a basic rule. It cannot be applied everywhere, but that's what they're looking for. And from our perspective, while we do have minimum requirements for capacity for our championships, in fact, it's as of today, when we evaluate candidate cities for our championships, we're definitely looking a lot more on the potential of filling the stadium than the capacity of the stadium. It's actually extremely important for us that the stadium is filled during the event. Afterwards, it's also leaving a legacy, and this is such a cliche, leaving a legacy, but I'm going to say it anyway, is actually a very important part for us moving forward. Not necessarily saying that it's not like we're not doing it for ourselves. We're definitely looking to a legacy for strengthening the sport afterwards. So legacy would definitely be, for instance, if you do have a stadium for this particular event, we would look to you hosting a meet on an annual basis afterwards, for instance, and we would work together to make that come true. The same for, if you look at when we've hosted, which is not in the stadium, but when we hosted the World Half Marathon Championships in recent years, it has always continued afterwards in an annual race in this city. So the legacy part of it, and the we do not want to have a stadium with 100,000 people capacity if we only need 20,000. So this has been increasingly important on our side, that we want a full stadium. We do not want a big stadium necessarily.
All right, thank you.
Okay, one more.
Yeah, please.
They keep popping in my mind. So, Jakob, in the organization of the Diamond Leagues and now the Continental Tour that is coming up, as of last year, the decision made by the then IAAF was to strike off the longer races from the broadcasting period, the 10,000 meters. And then now the Continental Tour, I just got to see the schedule of what will be airing. And then again, the 10,000, the longest race that can be aired is a 5,000 meters. So how then do we bring the competition from across the countries that can produce that, that can have athletes that will take part in the 10,000 meters? Because if at all, we only have national athletes taking place in the non-broadcasted race. And how do we bring about the competition across sport for those longer races? And how do we then tap new talent in those races?
So that's a really good question. I think as we move forward, what we'll see is that instead of having a generic discipline program applied across the meets, we would be moving forward. We would be very specific about which disciplines go where. Because this is not only about World Athletics saying we do not want this, we do not want that, etc. It's also about the meet organizers saying, what are we able to sell in our local market? This is also part of the discussion. So what we need to do as we move forward is we need to be clever about how to do this, because obviously distance running in Africa, it's like it goes hand in hand. I mean, it goes without saying. And I would argue there are other markets where the same is the case. Whereas in parts of Europe, the field events is of very, very high priority. So we would need to customize this as we move forward, and we need to be increasingly we need to be able to harvest the data necessary to support the evolution of the discipline program in each country, in each area, etc. as we move forward. So instead of having the same, more or less similar product across each meet, more or less, simply increasing the diversity across the meets. If you're for a meet in Kenya, you should be able to feel this is Kenya. I think that is key as we move forward. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, thank you very much.
Just one question.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, this is more of a generic thing. Like, sorry. Yeah. When we do a sports management course and people want to whether pursue in a particular sport and all, and they kind of see, like more like privatized sport, like, they want to enter into football or they want to enter into a specific sport. Whereas I don't hear many people, well, at least not here in, or where I have been in Europe and Spain and all, that I want to work for federations who are into whether it be long trail running and obstacle races or whatever, in any of those sorts. Like, people just look at the highest level. So as students, like, how would you, let's say I'm interested in helping the federations. Obviously, I cannot help federation all over the globe, but I can maybe help it in Spain. What would your be advice into entering into that kind of industry, or potentially into that?
Wow, good question. I think moving forward, I think a key skill moving forward is to know how to modify and adjust the product you're working with, i.e. the sport, to fit the needs of the public. I think that's going to be very, very important. We come from an era where sport was at the center, and everything evolved around it. And so people would have to adjust to the needs of the sport. As we move forward, I think this is flipped. Sport is going to be adjusted to the needs of the public. So moving forward, a key skill, in my opinion, is to figure out how can sport help society in achieving local strategy, local agendas, etc. That's going to be extremely important. And from my experience, this is not something that organizations traditionally are very good at currently. But I think this is going to be extremely important in the near future.
All right, thank you.
Good. So, Jakob, I think very interesting questions we had here.
Yes.
Yeah, very interesting conversation. Now it's 4:15. I think we have to finish it here. I really appreciate and I would like to thank you for your time spending with us and sharing your insights. Extremely interesting, really.
No,
It's
been a
good
pleasure.
to talk about athletics and not always about football. As I always mention that, no? Other sports are of extreme interest as well for the people, and I think we had a very interesting conversation here. I would recommend to people, our audience, if it's okay with you or Jakob, that they connect with you through LinkedIn. So it's always good for them. And so thank you very much for your time, for your presence here. And well, we'll stay in contact. And we hope really that soon we can go back to this, what everybody's calling this new normal, and that people can start enjoying again running and at popular level, but also at competition level. No, I love to watch athletics, to be honest, and we really hope that Eugene 2021 and Tokyo 21 will take place and that we can enjoy it fully. So thank you once more for your time, Jakob. And if there is nothing else here, I would like to close the session then.
If he can kindly share his accounts, address on LinkedIn and all that, so that we can connect with him. And I'm looking forward to see him in Nairobi in September for the Continental Tour.
Are you traveling, Jakob?
Are you coming to Kenya?
Well, potentially, but it depends on travel.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows if you're able to travel? But in theory, yes. And if not, I'll definitely be there for the World Under-20s Championship.
Oh yeah, that's too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right. Like, kindly just share your pages that I can follow. We can follow up and link up with you.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, would be great, no?
Yes, definitely. Okay. But it's been a pleasure. It's been a true pleasure. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Jakob
Okay.
and Frank, for this amazing session, for your time, for sharing your insights on this very interesting topic. It was great to have you here. And also a big thanks to our participants for your active participation in today's session. We hope you found it interesting and useful. And just a quick reminder that next Wednesday at 3 p.m., we'll have the